SaaS Backwards is sponsored by Austin Lawrence Group, specializing in demand gen for SaaS. It sure is noisy. I deleted 100 emails from vendors just this morning. Your buyer has gotten better at ignoring you, and you're gonna need a big idea if you want to cut through all that clutter. Austin Lawrence is just the right agency to help you find it. So if your campaigns are falling on deaf eyeballs, let's talk. Visit austinlawrence.com today and let's build something bigger.
Welcome to the SaaS Backwards podcast, where we reverse engineer the success of fast-growing SaaS firms and explore strategies CMOs and CEOs are using to drive their businesses forward.
Welcome to SaaS Backwards, a podcast that helps SaaS CEOs and CMOs to accelerate growth and enhance profitability. Our guest today is Morten Poulsen, founder and CEO of Plytix, a product information management SaaS tailored to small and medium-sized businesses. Hey, Morten, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, and I'm excited to record your episode. And just before we get going, could you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and Plytix?
My name is Morten, originally from Denmark, but currently residing in Spain. My co-founder is Spanish, so that's why we decided on Spain. It was a bit better climate than Denmark at the end. Also, overheads were a bit cheaper, so it was an easy choice. So I've been living here in Spain now since 2017. Before that, I worked for Google, and before that, I had a brief career in the Danish army, and before that I made it as a student and a professional athlete, specifically playing football, or soccer as you call it. Straight out of Google, we founded Plytix, Alex and I, my co-founder, and I've been doing that ever since. And Plytix, as you mentioned in your intro, is product information management system, specifically for small and medium-sized businesses. And for those of the listeners who are not familiar with PIM, or product information management, it's in all its simplicity a database or repository for all product information. So if you're selling products online, or like any product, take a shoe for instance, then all the information, be that descriptions or prices or the label or pictures, all that information needs to live somewhere. And if you want that information to live in a central source of truth, that is called a PIM, or product information management system.
Awesome. And maybe it would be good to go right into what is the problem that Plytix solves? What are you trying to fix for customers? And, what's the competitive landscape look like for your business?
Yeah, so the main problem we are solving, or the jobs to be done, is basically to have a central source of truth. If you go to any business, and let's go back to the example of the shoe. Let's take a brand who is manufacturing shoes, and you ask for the complete picture of that shoe. So you say, I want all the information about that particular shoe. Often, people have to go to multiple spreadsheets and multiple systems to gather all the information because it's scattered. Like even in your web store, you would only find a fraction of all the information, that revolves around that particular product. So really what a PIM is and what we're solving is to give organizations that central source of truth. Now, if you look at you ask about the competitive landscape, like PIM has been around for quite some while, but it's predominantly been the sole purview of like big enterprise client or retailers. Take a company like Nike that has more than 20,000 employees around the world. They would need a PIM in order for all those 20,000 people to access the information about all the products at any given point. However, if you look at a small to medium-sized business with a small organization, the need for a PIM has never really been there before. Because, you could always just shout across a desk if you needed the latest picture or the latest description or an update on the prices. However, in recent years, we have seen specifically e-commerce, transforming from this single point of sale where people or brand were selling products on a website to what we now call multi-channel commerce, where e-commerce has evolved into, this multi-channel setup where you need to push your products to where your customers are. So take a standard, brand today, they would need to push all their products to Amazon, to Walmart, to Google Shopping, and to the website. And in a world going towards multi-channel commerce, the need for a PIM is not only for big, Fortune 500 retailers anymore, because now even small and medium-sized businesses, even if they have fewer employees, they now have multiple channels. So they have, the need for a PIM is now arising amongst SMBs as well, like small and medium-sized businesses. The problem then is they can't really afford a PIM because all these PIM has been designed and priced for the big enterprise client. They're built on old legacy and very heavy technology with a lot of features. So what we're solving is basically saying, like building the perfect PIM for small and medium-sized businesses. One with less features, but the right amount of features. A PIM that is easy to use and most importantly, cost-friendly. And we believe that if we can win the hearts and the minds of SMBs, we can capitalize on a huge growth potential in the market, because SMBs, when it comes to technology, is very underserved.
Yeah, and these folks have their own competitive issues, right? They're being squeezed by the brands that can proliferate their product across all the different channels, right? So this is really a way to compete with larger entities on a similar footing, if not the same footing.
Yeah, 100%. Like if you take a big company with lots of resources, they can afford to basically own all the real estate on all the marketplaces. They have the time and the bandwidth, to optimize all the product content for all of their products on all of the channels and basically own more real estate than anyone else. We believe that if we can, through technology, level the playing field by giving SMBs similar technology that allows them to work more efficiently and scalable, we can help SMBs win back some of that real estate, like above the fold on marketplaces and search engines and whatnot. Because let's face it, in retail in particular, you see the big enterprise brands, they're growing 6 times faster than the SMBs. So we have this ever-growing performance gap between the really big ones and then the rest. And we would like to do what we can to see if we can close that gap again, just by giving the same technology, same data advantages back in the hands of the SMBs by making powerful technology affordable and user-friendly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really it's important to talk about what that means for you as a SaaS and other SaaS founders. We have to have a really meaningful problem that we're solving for our customers. And the notion of product market fit is really what we're talking about in the end here, is that you have a market that has this pain and they may not have a lot of good solutions, especially when you started addressing them as a segment. And so that allows you to have that opportunity for growth in your own business, right? It allows you to accelerate when you actually find a problem that needs solving. And certainly this is one of them. But you did start out with something a little different, right? I mean, it wasn't like this was your original idea, though it's obvious you have a great passion for it. Might be worth kind of sharing just what you were originally going to market with and why, and how that experience allowed you to understand this problem, to discover the actual problem you could solve.
Yeah, so when we founded Plytix back in 2015, we started the company. The idea was very different, as you said. The idea was to build a platform where, brands could exchange product information with retailers, and then through that product information, through that link between brands and retailers, we would be able to track how end users were interacting with products and then send that back as analytics data to the brands. So long story short, we wanted to create an e-commerce specific analytics tool where instead of measuring the performance of a website, we measure the performance of a product. And the whole, golden ticket of this idea was, brands could see how end users interact with their products, even when they're sold on third-party websites. And the idea was great, and we got a lot of early traction and press, and we were featured in TechCrunch and whatnot when we first got the investment. But after 2 years, we didn't really make a dent in the market. And the first challenge was, it was really hard to build a two-sided business model. On one hand, we needed the brands to, publish all their product information on our side, and we needed all the retailers to go there and fetch the information, more importantly, the pictures, in order to create that link. And the second question was, it was really hard to get the product information, because we were assuming that all the brands, they just had this central source of truth. It was just give us a feed and we will have all the information in our platform. It will take them 15 minutes to create that feed. And that's where we discovered that they didn't even have a central source of truth. So we built a very, very simple setup that allowed them to have a central source of truth, because that was the only way we can get information on the platform. But as I said, after nearly 2 years, and we were like not able to gain any significant traction, and we had 4 months of runway left, we had to take a good and long, hard look at what we were doing. And funny enough, we started analyzing all the tickets we were receiving from our customers. And 90% of them were basically pointing in direction of improving our simple product information uploader tool. And that's where we discovered like what the market really wants is it's not an exchange. They want a PIM and they can't afford it. And I have to be completely honest with you, Ken. I didn't know what a PIM was when we started Plytix. I do now, though. But so we basically by accident stumbled upon this opportunity. Like there was a huge gap in the market. There was certainly a need for a PIM for SMBs, but there were no PIM out there that would address that market. So yeah, with 4 months left of runway, we had to let some people go as well, which was really hard. But we had to refocus and pivot into PIM, and we had to raise new money. And obviously our first investors, half of them, they lost faith in us. Some of them decided to continue, and we had to get some new investors. We were thinking a lot about, should we just liquidate this company and start over? But at the end, we also felt we had a commitment to our early stage investors. So we decided to pivot within the same company. And yeah, in the last month, we closed a term sheet and we had to take a loan because the money wouldn't come after due diligence process. But yeah, in January 2018, the money arrived and we officially had pivoted to a PIM. And since then, it's been, another startup journey, but a journey of PIM, and it's been going really well since.
It's a good story, and we talked about this before, but I think for listeners to understand the value of honoring your commitments and having integrity in dealings with your investors, I really admire it. And I think it's a way to ensure your own future success here in this business and, should you start another one. And I'm wondering, if you've had conversations actually with the investors, like, did they recognize that you had done that, or is that just something it was organic,
No, actually, we didn't talk about this with investors at all. And honestly, if you look at the cap table and you look at the dilution we've suffered, especially as founders, you can argue maybe it was a wrong decision. But at the end of the day, Alex, my co-founder, and I, we looked each other into the eyes and said, it's not about the cap table. It's not about the potential exit. It's about who do we want to be when we look in the mirror, like what are our actual values as human beings. You're right, it might be that if we should be so lucky to be a second or even third time founders, maybe this was a good move, but it wasn't a strategic move. At the end, it was just a matter of saying, what kind of people do we want to be? And we felt we had to honor, because it's true, we didn't know what a PIM was, and this is a totally different business, but we wouldn't have stumbled upon this without, the early investors investing in the first business idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's a great story. And I mentioned to you that, I've seen founders up close who didn't respect their investors, spent the money unwisely. And I think it's a really terrible path. I think people invest money in the people, not the business idea. And so you have to sort of honor that. Like, they didn't invest in you because they thought you were going to build a PIM, right? These people invested in you for this other business idea, but really they invested in you and your partner as entrepreneurs they thought might be able to take them where they wanted to go, as investors in their journey. So I just think it's really cool part of the story. And, I think the takeaway for listeners is be mindful that you have to look at yourself, but also you have a reputation, and how you treat investors is important, especially if you're ever going to do it again. Building a good reputation is just everything.
And I think you're right. Honestly, I never looked at it that way, but I definitely do recognize it, and I appreciate your kind words. But as I said, it was never a strategic choice for us, and we never thought much of it. It just felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think it's cool that you went and looked in your own data, and so almost like the answer was in your business, right? You weren't getting the traction you expected in the analytics, and you had the business model problem and getting everybody to participate, and your customers not even being prepared. I guess I want to know, like, what made you think to even look at your tickets? Like, what was that process? And, is there something in there that's worth telling?
Yeah, that's a good question. What made us look at the tickets? I actually don't remember if there was like an an epiphany moment or something. But like at some point, as I said, we just like, okay, everybody stop coding, stop doing what you're doing. Like, what are we solving for? What are we doing this for? Like, is there any chance we can get traction with what we have? Like, what are we doing wrong? How do we solve the two-sided business model? How do we solve the data? Let's have a look at, is there anything in the tickets that can tell us how we can speed up and make the onboarding of product information more transactional? Because we looked at tickets every day, but we never looked at tickets holistically. We never started analyzing. And it's just like, once we start doing that, it was just so obvious and right there in our face. Like everybody was basically just screaming, at us saying, we want a PIM. PIMs are too expensive and they're too difficult to use. Give us an easy to use and an affordable PIM and we'll be your customers. So actually it didn't even take us more than 3 months to come up with a very rudimentary PIM, and we closed the first 30 clients in the first month. So the validation was there.
Wow. That's pretty amazing because, I've talked with obviously a lot of entrepreneurs, and they always talk about, the first client really tough to come by, the first 5 as tough. And yet here you have this almost instant validation. That says a lot, right?
Well, it's instant after 2 years, but yeah.
Well appreciated. I like to say that almost every overnight success I've encountered was about 7 or 8 years in the making.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
By the time you come on stage as an overnight success, you've been at it a while. So fair enough.
Yeah.
So I think this is a great time to segue into your approach to your target market. A little unusual. I think you're in southern Spain, right? That's where you're
Correct.
located. And yet, where's the majority of the business come from?
I think 55% of our customers are based in the US and the rest all over the world. If you look at markets that are English speaking, I would say they make up at least 70 to 75% of our market. So it's not that we have, a target market per se. We have an ICP, like we have an ideal customer profile. We don't have like an ICP saying we need to go after these people. We know these kind of companies, we are a good fit, and these kind of companies, we are a perfect fit. And then there are other kinds of companies where we are a not so good fit. And we use that a lot in our efforts to qualify, prospects when they come to us. The reason why we don't have an actual target market, and I think that's what you're going for, is that we don't do any sales at Plytix. We don't have any direct sales. We don't reach out to people directly. Everything is inbound.
So when you say you don't have sales, what you mean is you really don't have an outbound motion, right?
Correct. Yeah. What we consider sales. Yeah. Outbound sales. So what we do is we build this growth engine around, capturing leads. Like we do invest a lot in ads online and specifically on search engines and review sites, because our strategy is very simple. We want to own as much real estate as possible when people are in market for a PIM. So our strategy revolves around, being there and being present when companies decide that spreadsheet no longer cut it. Like there's a moment where companies grow out of managing product information in a spreadsheet because it creates all these data silos. Like we need a system for this. So what we try to do is like put ourselves in the minds of those people as saying, what happens when these data silos occurs? What are they searching for? And what we've learned, and also remember myself, I come from a background in Google. So, very familiar with the Google advertising platform. So our strategy has always revolved around that moment when people are in market and actively looking for a PIM. And where they're looking predominantly on Google, but also on review sites. So our strategy, especially as a young startup without a lot of money to burn, we said, we can't do everything. We can't do like an outbound motion and display advertising and search engine advertising. We need to focus on one. And our strategy has been to own more real estate than any other PIM on the market when people are in market. So we want to own review sites and we want to own Google search for people searching for a PIM. Because our hypothesis is if people know our Plytix and they know they need a PIM, because we have a very, attractive price point and we are very user-friendly and we have good satisfaction score on review side, we should win the majority of the deals when people are actively looking for a PIM. So that has been our strategy.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. You can't spread yourself too thin. And certainly the first place is, what we would call demand capture or lead generation, right? And that's where you're
Hmm.
focused. And at some point, though, as you grow to even be larger than you might be today, then you start looking up the life of a customer, right? And say,
Yeah.
well, can I create customers by educating them maybe a little before they're ready, or creating a switching motion as opposed to a first time motion?
You're absolutely right. Like the first 3 years, it was very easy to grow 100+% every year. But at some point, you reach the ceiling of how many people who are actively looking for a PIM. And yeah, we've reached that ceiling like 2 years ago. Like it's not that we can go out and force people to search for PIM on Google. Like there's a cap of how many leads we can generate from people actively searching for it. So we've had to recalibrate our efforts to focus on not only capturing people who know they need a PIM, but also start educating the market. And that has been a challenge for us. And we have just begun experimenting with outbound sales motion, but I have to be honest, we're not very good at it. So we're also making other experiments as well, revolving around more upper funnel marketing efforts. Some of these experiments are proving themselves to be, fruitful, but not at a point yet where we can scale. So we're at this point right now where we have predictable growth, but we don't own our own growth. We don't have this thing that goes beyond in-market, marketing, where we can say for every $1 we invest, we get $2 in return in growth. We haven't quite found that yet, but that is where we are right now, and a very interesting challenge as well, because I think we've mastered, the predictable growth from people searching actively for PIM. But now it's the next part, how to educate the market and make them realize they need a PIM.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. There's a great book, I think we talked about this, The Challenger Customer, which,
Yeah.
if listeners haven't read this is the marketing book for sales-oriented companies. Really fabulous. And we've sort of touched on a lot of the key topics there about being problem aware or not, solution aware or not, and then getting into a buying motion. And I think that, a lot of your potential customers may very well be problem aware, but have no idea what to do about it, right? So that's a good
Yeah.
opportunity to start reaching out to folks that, maybe you can even tell from the outside in, they're not as well sorted on it.
Just to give you a bit of a compliment, when you invited me on this podcast, I actually went in and listened to some of your episodes, and we've been listening to an episode with another company, and we have just signed a deal with them. So one of our experiments to own our own growth is actually to employ another guest that has been on this podcast before.
Isn't that cool? I mean, that's the kind of thing we were actually hoping for, that there would be
Yeah.
some kind of synergy among podcast guests. And I have to reach out to him too and congratulate him for that. And I want to know how that goes too. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I'll make sure to keep you updated.
Cool. And I think we should talk a little bit about this approach to lead generation, and an important topic. It always happens in the life of a marketing leader or an agency or both, where the person who pays the bills, either the CFO or the CEO, kind of pounds the table and says, where's this money going and why am I spending it, right? And especially if you had a near-death experience like you guys did, and you have the background in, pretty attributable marketing at Google, you probably brought that mindset into this business. So I'd love you to sort of bring people into how you guys do attribution, how you do your optimization of investments. I just think there's a lot of value for especially the marketing leaders that need to defend themselves and make good decisions in the way you approach it. So could you kind of share with people what you're doing and how it works?
Yeah, and just for context, because maybe not everybody know exactly what you mean by attribution modeling. So it's basically just, if you think in marketing terms, it's about measuring, the effect of your marketing channels and your efforts in revenue rather than in leads, and attribute each touch point with a certain value. It's a very complicated topic because it's not only about building the attribution modeling in your organization, for us at least. It was also, when does it make sense to do so? And for us, like, as you said, I come from Google. It's not that attribution modeling is a foreign subject for us. It's just like, we've always known what it is, and we always known how valuable it is to have a solid attribution modeling in place. Yet we didn't implement it until 18 months ago. Because if you just, apply an attribution modeling without having a constant. In this case, the constant is what happens after a lead is closed. Then you're basically just getting data that is highly corrupted. So the first thing for us was actually saying, okay, we have to start somewhere. We need to measure the effect of marketing on how many leads we can produce. And then the next step for us was to get a predictable engine running for what happens with those leads. And that is where we had to educate ourselves a lot, not in sales, but more on account management. So what happens with leads? And to begin with, we started with people just nurturing leads end to end. And then we broke it up into saying, okay, leads comes in, a BDR team nurture them and create opportunities. And then an AE team takes over and takes BDR, like opportunities to close deals. And then close deals goes to a customer success. And then that engine had to be perfected over time until a point where we can say with pretty accurate certainty that, for every lead that comes in, we will produce this many customers. There wasn't too much of fluctuations in the conversion rates between each lifecycle stage. And I think, for me at least, it's important to not jump the gun and implement an attribution modeling before you know that, especially for a B2B SaaS, that you have a constant engine for what happens after you become a lead. Now, once we have that, then we started implementing an attribution modeling tool where we started attributing, revenue, because now we know that whatever clients we close, we know exactly how much ARR that clients are closing. Then we can start looking at all the touch points that led to that close of the clients, and we can start attributing that revenue to all those touch points. So that has been a journey for us. And I wish we could have started building our marketing engine with an attribution modeling in place. But as I said, you have to start with first building a lead generation engine, and then an engine that can convert leads to customers before, at least in my opinion, before you can implement an attribution modeling tool and that can give you valuable insights. So let me pause there and see if I just confuse you more than.
Well, I think I followed along, and I think the point, it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
You have to have sort of the customer creation engine, right? From the lead to customer and onboarding success. You have to have that really well sorted out so that you can actually start to understand the value of the opportunities coming in, right?
Yeah, because otherwise you just look at all your marketing channels and you say, oh, they're not worth it because they're not generating revenue. Because the problem with attribution modeling is that it doesn't give you immediate feedback. A lead, a conversion gives you immediate feedback. But let's say in our case, the average turnaround time from lead to close is 123 days. Without knowing that turnaround time, you wouldn't know when to look at the different stages. You wouldn't know how to analyze success leading indicators in your attribution modeling tool. You wouldn't know how to weight the value of the different stages in your pipeline and the lifecycle stages to assign proper value to an SQL, to an MQL, to an opportunity. You know what I mean? Because it's very easy to say, oh, this campaign has generated that much revenue, but you can only see that, in our case, after 123 days. So what do you do when you launch a new campaign and it doesn't give you revenue after a week? You'll be likely to pause that. But that's where I think you cannot just build a marketing engine with attribution modeling from day one. You need to know how to look at the data.
I totally agree. And especially with a sales cycle that's not instant, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the SaaS that have low ARR, that, it's a one call close, or you don't even need to talk to somebody, they have it much easier because they
PLG company is a different story. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, especially PLG, like you get it right away. So let's talk about a little bit of under the covers. You were not satisfied, though you're a HubSpot user, you weren't 100% satisfied with the tools that were available on the platform. And what else are you using to give you insight into the value of marketing?
It wasn't that we weren't satisfied with HubSpot. We are very happy customers of HubSpot. It was just like,
and we're a HubSpot partner. I mean, we beat the drum all the time.
No,
but it's it's an all-in-one solution, so it's not going to do everything as well as the best pure plays, right? That's just the way it is.
No, you're right. And I must admit, when we made the decision to switch from lead-based reporting to revenue-based reporting in marketing and implement an attribution modeling tool, we looked at the attribution modeling tool available through HubSpot, and we looked at other tools as well. And I must say, the attribution modeling tool in HubSpot wasn't as good as some of the other pure players. So we decided at the end to go with a tool called Dream Data. Happened to be another startup in Denmark. And, I know some of the founders from a previous time in Google, but that's not why we selected them. We selected them at the end because they are attribution modeling tool exclusively for B2B SaaS. And that kind of narrow focus makes them a perfect fit for us. The other thing that I really liked about it is that I don't have to, it's supposed to, if you build your own tool, you don't have to decide on one attribution model. Like some people only look at linear attribution modeling where they say that you have 4 touch points, then you just allocate the revenue or the cost in 25% equal portions. Some other companies or some other attribution modeling involves only looking at the first touch point where you assign all the value to only the first touch point or the last touch point. But what I really like about this particular tool is that you can toggle in between, because sometimes it makes sense to look at a attribution model that is data driven using the Markov chain. Sometimes it makes sense to look at it on linear. Sometimes it makes sure to look at, so it's not that you have to apply one attribution model. You have to analyze your campaigns and everything you do, toggling between all these different attribution modeling. And that's something this tool does really well.
And it also allows you to see the impact of like discrete elements of your marketing activity, right? So you can see performance of different content assets, campaigns, things like that.
I can give you an example. Like we were looking at one particular campaign on the review side and looking at the data-driven, the ROAS, like the return on ad spend, wasn't above 100%. And we were inclined to pause that particular campaign. But before we did that, we just toggled to the first touch. So it's true. In that given time frame, this particular campaign has only, influenced 4 deals. But what was really interesting was all those 4 deals started on that campaign. So that all of a sudden, if you change from influenced deals on a Markov chain or a linear, the ROAS was low. But when you toggle to the first touch point, it was highly profitable. So one could argue that even though on the linear attribution modeling that this wasn't a profitable thing, we're still talking about 4 clients we wouldn't have gotten if we didn't have that campaign. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is why it's so valuable and why it's so dangerous, not only to look at one attribution model.
And I think, again, I meet a lot of CEOs and CFOs, and I don't think they're all as aware of how important this aspect is. They just sort of look at dollars in, dollars out at a very gross level. And I think the encouragement I would want to give listeners is you need to make everybody roll up their sleeves and go through the data, right?
Yeah.
You can't just say, hey, I don't want to spend this money because it's in my gut somewhere, right? You have to actually look at the data.
Yeah.
We didn't even get to talk about one of my favorite topics yet, and I want to touch on it really briefly because we're going to run out of time. But what advice do you have for, European-based SaaS entrepreneurs that, cherish and want to target the US buyer? Are there any like 2 or 3 important things that you would encourage them? Because you obviously have been very successful from Spain and Denmark, your background in Denmark, targeting English-speaking countries. So unusual in my experience. How'd you pull it off?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think we had a game plan saying this is how we're going to succeed in the US, but with a European company. As I said, we built an inbound engine. So it just happened to be that there's a lot of people in the US searching for PIM in English. So they found Plytix. The other thing I might add is, and not that we've deliberately been targeting like US employees, but we do employ a lot of US employees, even here in Spain, and now also remotely in the US, both in the sales team and the marketing team. So I think that if you look at the overall commercial team, I think they're predominantly either American or Irish. So that has of course influenced our go-to-market strategy, our communication, the way we set up things, and maybe that has helped us. But honestly, I wish I could give you some golden nuggets in that respect, but I can't. I think it has a lot to do with us employing people from the US, even here in Spain.
I mean, I think though, you're not giving yourself enough credit. I mean, you might have done it intuitively, but the fact is that the content is in English. It looks like an American website when you visit with it, right? I don't think you're trying to hide anything, but it's comfortable. We're a very provincial people. We like our things to be local. Yeah. So if we have to interpret the meaning, that doesn't work for us. So the fact that the way you present yourselves is very comfortable to US site visitors and I think your understanding of the business also is very important. So I just feel like there's more to talk about there. I think we should come back at it at some point, maybe do another episode.
Yeah, we can. Absolutely.
That would be fun. So Morten, I think we should land it here. If people want to learn more about your company or reach out to you, how can they do those things?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I think my name should be in the description of the podcast. I tend to accept all the invitations I get, but also if you want to learn more about Plytix, it's plytix.com. And yeah, it's a pretty website, as you say.
Yeah, I think it's highly functional and informative. That's great. If people want to reach me, I'm on LinkedIn/in/Ken Lempit. And I'm at kl@austinlawrence.com. And if you haven't subscribed yet to SaaS Backwards podcast, please do so wherever podcasts are distributed. Morten Poulsen, thank you so much for a great episode of SaaS Backwards. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me. And again, thanks a million for your podcast. I'm now a regular listener.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to the SaaS Backwards podcast, brought to you by Austin Lawrence Group. We're a growth marketing agency that helps SaaS firms reduce churn, accelerate sales, and generate demand. Learn more about us at www.austinlawrence.com. You can email Ken Lempit at kl@austinlawrence.com about any SaaS marketing or customer retention subject. We hope you'll subscribe, and thanks again for listening.